welcome to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the show. Reminder, is streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and airing live on Sportsnet 360, Monday to Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. I'm your host, William Liu. I'm joined by producer and co-host Alex Wong. What are we going to do today? We skewered Nick yesterday, so is it the player's turn?
Nah, man. Yesterday, was it a barbecue yesterday? We put him on a skewer.
Put him on a kebab, man.
Yeah, we'll get to the end of the rest of the end of season availability in a couple minutes. I forgot there's 2 play-in tournament games tonight.
How could you forget?
Are you excited about Chicago at Miami and OKC at Minnesota?
I'm pretty excited for both of these. I'm not gonna lie. Just because like winner take all basketball is always exciting. Like it's just a shame that typically we get it in the NCAA where the quality of play is generally poor than professional basketball. And I say generally because it really is poor in like 99% of instances. But I do think that it'll be exciting. I'm looking forward to seeing. I mean, I don't think either team in the Eastern Conference is going to do anything to Milwaukee. But I am curious in terms of like, okay, which team can maybe scare Denver a little bit. I would expect Denver to clear both of those 2 teams. But at least they have more of a chance in the West. In the East, it's just kind of just like this is like the last gasp for either of these 2 franchises because if we fast forward to like an hour from now when we're previewing the first round, neither of them are going to take a game off Milwaukee. 1 game at most. 1 game at the very most.
Yeah, gentleman's sweep at most. Out of these 4 teams, which team do you think has the most to lose if their season were to end tonight?
I mean, do you have anything to lose when you're in the play-in tournament? Like, you're already done.
Well,
you can't get a good lottery pick, and you really can't make noise in the first round either. So, like, I think they all have the same to lose, quite frankly.
No, I'm thinking like, for Miami, they had a terrible season, and that roster is getting up there in age in terms of the key players. I mean, they still have Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, but...
You know who has the most to lose? Bam Adebayo, man. His reputation in the first match of Atlanta, that was in the mud, so he's got to redeem himself against Nick Vucevic.
Also, potentially Udonis Haslem's last game tonight.
Right.
Just for everybody tuning. I think Minnesota has a lot to lose, too. Like, if you get to the first round, you get to the same result as you got to last year. But if you flame out and lose 2 playing games here, and given all the Rudy Gobert stuff, like, this would just be an abject failure for them.
I think the interesting things for me is just, like, what do they have to win?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
In the infamous words of Masai Ujiri, playing for what? I mean, like...
Spoken from the guy who spent all week previewing Bulls Raptors.
Exactly.
And lying to me.
In hindsight, Masai was absolutely right about it. So,
all right, you're very anti-play now. Since Wednesday's game.
I'm pro the game itself, but after they win the game, like, this is their shining moment.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
You're saying it doesn't matter.
I mean, it doesn't say it doesn't matter in the scope of the bigger terms
okay, no,
of,
that's
like,
fair.
what the playoffs are going to look like.
Yeah,
It'll matter to them tonight, though, for sure. So I'm looking forward to watching them.
For Raptors fans, if you care, if the Bulls and Thunder win tonight, the Raptors will have the 11th best lottery odds.
That's what we're praying for?
That's what we're rooting for.
We're praying for okay, let's do that. Let's do that.
Put the Bulls and Thunder on a parlay.
Okay.
And we get the 11th best lottery odds. I just want to get a higher pick. I just want to jump Dallas. In the lottery. By the way,
I just want to jump Dallas, period, because they're such a disappointing NBA
They were
team.
fined $75,000.
That's it?
Today. For I believe what was described as conduct detrimental to the league.
$75,000. What's that going to do? The franchise is valued at like $5 billion.
Yeah, let me double check that email from Jim LeBombard. See if I missed a 0.
Yeah, you might have missed 1 0 in there.
Yeah, so we'll get it.
Either way, it's not really going to impact anything.
Yeah.
So the cost of tanking publicly and openly is $75K or $750K. Like, who cares, man?
That's the cost of not being in the play-in tournament.
Also, was Masai fined for playing for what? Because if the Mavericks are fined for this, I mean, technically that's what the Raptors said.
No, I think Adam Silver had to take it lightly there because remember he went on that HBO program and said that it was Masai's fault when the security officer pushed him at the end of the finals. So
yes, he said Masai was at fault for police brutality, which that was a tough look for Adam Silver, man. He said that on camera.
Happy Friday. Yesterday we talked about Knicks' future and just a quick update on that too. So per J. Lou of the other network, he wrote a end of season column yesterday, and he said in his story that the front office was not happy about Knicks' comments in Philly, and they let him hear about it, according to sources. And he went on to say that there are players in the room who did not appreciate hearing their coach openly question his future with 2 weeks left in a season that they were still trying to salvage. So I think this was just kind of in line with everything that we've talked about, and we can move on.
Yeah. Again, none of this is surprising. Like, there's just He didn't really need to do it. He did it. Didn't really walk it back. And then we asked him about it at the end of the season. Yeah, we've sort of beaten the storyline to death. I mean, if he ultimately gets extended or if he gets let go, we will cover it again. But yeah, it's hardly surprising. And again, it was all because of the timing and the situation. Again, all this could have been avoided. Like, we could have said none of this.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna bring you a news item that you are excited about at some point today.
Okay.
I feel like I'm 0 for 4 so far.
No, it's all good, man.
It's all good. Happy Friday.
You brought me this bubble tea, so this is already like a win. For
the man forgot the tapioca, so never trust a non-Asian to make a bubble tea is the takeaway on this one.
Yeah, you said you went to the shop and the boy there was reading off of an instruction card, so
yeah,
that's tough.
Don't show the label. So at yesterday's end of season availability, a lot of the players on the roster talked and, wanted to pick out some of these clips and thought we could talk about them more in depth. One of the things that stood out to me was, Fred was asked and all the players were asked about, what do you think by the end of the season now that this roster needs? And Fred had a really interesting answer that I thought stood out. Here's what he had to say.
Find another identity, you know what I mean? Whatever that is. And I think that the chaos and the freedom, it worked when it worked. And I think that going forward, just pick what we're going to do. Like, it's not really that complicated. You know what I mean? We lock into how things are going to flow offensively. Obviously we got a ton of talent for the breakdown situations. Defensively, I do like the system that we have in place. It needs to be executed at a higher clip. We need more reps and we need sharper. But I think for us, the devil's going to be in the details. And I think that, we have to rep that and build that. Like, we can't try to do it by osmosis and, like, try to carry over a championship from 4 years ago and expect to add that to a group that we have now. Like, we got to build that every single day, starting as soon as we get back in the gym this summer. Like, you got to start building every single detail offensively and defensively. And then when you get down to a situation where you need to win a game, like, those things show. And I think that's, as a group, for the players, that's my focus, is like getting our habits back right and our details back right. And I think everything else will fall in place accordingly after that.
Yeah, before I get your comments on this too, Fred talked to Steve Bulpett of Heavy.com during
man. Yo, shouts to Steve Bulpett, man. It might be time. We have to get him on at some point.
Get him out the bullpit.
Legit.
Interview took place during the last week of the season, and Fred told Heavy.com, quote, talent by itself is just not good enough. You still got to do everything right every single day. You've got to be able to play as a team. You have to be able to execute and close out games. And when he was asked about if his teammates have fully grasped what they have and what they could be accomplishing, Fred said, quote, I've been screaming it for 2 years. You know what I mean? I think that at a certain point, you can't make anybody grow up. It's going to happen at their own pace and at their own speed. And that's the frustrating part about maturity and just the development stage, is that you can harp on it all you want to. So I thought Fred's answer yesterday really did sum up, I think, what a lot of people feel about this team, right? And the identity that needs to change going forward.
No, I mean, I think it's pretty strong, what he said here in terms of finding the new identity. I think it's clear he wants more structure on offense, right? Because he talked about the defense. He likes the system. We can execute at a higher clip, but, there's good things there. Yeah, I mean, we even when we talked to Nick Nurse, remember at the start of the season, he was in that grumpy mood and we interviewed him. Sorry, didn't need to expose that part. But I asked him about sort of the emphasis that he puts on the offense and the emphasis he puts on the defense, and he talked about how, like, the more and more he gets into this game, the more he's become obsessed with, like, finding ways to stop the other team, right? Versus, like, drawing up the plays on offense. And he's spoken about it too in terms of the freedom that gives to a lot of players. And when you watch the Raptors play, clearly there is a sense of freedom. The thing is, like, I mean, how much freedom should there be for a team that is still developing, for a lot of offensive players on the team who don't have, like, natural offensive skill sets, right? I think the more structure you put into it, the better. And to be fair to Nick, this is like a league-wide trend. Like, a lot of teams around the league also play with a free-flowing offense. Very few teams come down the floor and they run a set and play the half-court offense. We see so much fast break offense. I think that's going to happen regardless. That's just how the league is going, and that's definitely where the Raptors have their advantages, is playing in the half court or in the full court. But in a half court setting, there definitely needs to be more put into place, and I think that that's really what Fred is talking about. And of course, all the details and stuff like that definitely helps. It's again, like I said yesterday, the Raptors are not a team that has overwhelming talent by any means. They are not a team that really is structured for one or two guys to just go by themselves and sort of create everything for everything else. This is not like, I suppose, what the Dallas Mavericks should be on paper, for example. There's not like Kyrie and Luka kind of scenario on this team. There's neither. And so in order for the Raptors to win, they need to be great defensively, which I think they should be. And obviously they fell short of that this season. They need to put structure in the offense. There's a clear hierarchy. There's a clear set in terms of like who's going to be where, and at least that sort of takes out some of the free-flowing aspect of it, because I don't think the Raptors are good at that. And then they have to really hammer out all the details. Like this is not a team that is just so talented that you can just roll the ball out. So I'm not saying that that's what Nick did this year. I'm not saying that that's what Fred is saying Nick did this year, but I do feel like there needs to be even more of an emphasis on that. Like, honestly, offensive freedom should be taken away from a lot of players on this team.
No more democracy in this offense?
I didn't say that, man.
Oh, okay.
Don't play the chairman loop.
Oh, my bad.
Do not say that.
My bad.
Do not play it.
Where do you think Fred fits in, though, in this new identity? Like, assuming he does come back, right? Like, on both ends of the floor. Like, do you see him as a capable point guard of, like, managing this core group? Like, where do you see him fitting in? Because I know he's talking about the rest of the team.
I mean, Fred is really like an extension of the coaching staff in a way, right? Like, he is like the coach on the floor, so to speak. And so, I do see him, setting the play, organizing people, getting people in the right spots. And then, obviously the ideal scenario is not for Fred to be your second leading scorer. I don't think that that's conducive to being good on offense. We've seen the stats bear itself out over 3 years now. And so I think in a scenario where someone can take that mantle alongside of Pascal, or maybe even slightly behind Pascal in terms of those are your main scorers, and then Fred's your third guy, probably fits a lot better in that sense, right? But again, I think it depends on the roster. Like, who is actually both has the aptitude to take that on and also has the ability to deliver those kind of results.
Yeah, I think the part of it too is like hard to talk about this in full right now, just because we don't know what the roster is going to be next season, right? Because like we're talking about so much of this, just assuming that this is the core group, right?
Sure.
And the conversation probably is going to change in like July, when we revisit this and like talk about it, right? You could see some changes here. I thought it was interesting too. Like, Fred's always been known as the most candid, outspoken guy, and he was that again yesterday. And in contrast to Pascal, who kind of laughed about it himself too. So Pascal, a reporter told Pascal about Fred's comments, and here's what Pascal had to say.
Like, Fred said that? I don't know. Again, my favorite line is like, I just, there's people that get paid some money to do that, and it's mostly not part of my job. But whenever there's going to be discussions, and if my input is allowed, or once we get to even that, like, there's going to be conversation to be made. But for me, like, that's just not something that I feel like I need to discuss.
That's a very healthy approach, I feel like, by Pascal with the way that he's dealing with the media.
It's funny because Pascal realizes that, like, he has used this line over and over again, that, that's above my pay grade, which, I mean, to be honest, no one's really above his pay grade on the team. He's definitely the highest paid person in all of the Toronto Raptors organization. So obviously amended it. But yeah, I mean, I think Pascal's approach towards this is just like, look, I don't want to comment on this. It's the same thing at the trade deadline, right? Talked about it in terms of, like, everyone asks, obviously, about what do you think is going to happen with the roster? What do you think we need? And this is his go-to move. This is like the spin move. This is like his spin move, but in the media.
Out of trouble. He spun out of trouble.
It's literally his spin move.
He swirled his way out of another
like,
question.
Oh, it's above my pay grade. He's like, I just focus on basketball.
No,
like, you know what? I don't mind. I really don't mind. Because you know what it does? It doesn't create any controversy. It doesn't create any conversation.
Yeah, there's no, like, conflicting answers
and
with
people
Fred.
Can't read into it in terms of what Pascal truly thinks or whatever.
No, so. I honestly wanted to highlight that because I think it's a really, really smart approach. Like, we do appreciate Fred's candidness, but yeah, Pascal just wants to hoop and drink Red Bull. Like, that's it. Those are his two things.
No,
and play
really
FIFA.
is.
What else? What else is on his top 5 list, you think?
He probably wants to play soccer.
Okay, that as well. Yeah. No,
Pascal, come out to my Friday runs.
What?
It's right beside your favorite restaurant, school.
Not pie, which Gary shouted out yesterday.
Are we on that topic already?
No, I just wanted to
okay.
just wanted to slip that in there.
Shouts
as I
to
mentioned.
Pi. PAI, by the way.
Yeah, shouts to
PAI.
Pi. We're talking about the new identity and like Fred's role on the team too. And Sportsnet's William Liu, was on hand to ask Fred about coexisting with Scottie and facilitating his growth as a point guard. And here's what Fred had to say about that.
Yeah, I would love to play with another point guard. I would love it. You know what I mean? It worked well when me and Kyle did it. Not that, they started that anywhere, the same player, same type of player. But, again, we explored a lot of that this year. There was a lot of times where he was the primary ball handler. It kind of went back and forth. Again, I think I try to share with him as much as I can in my experiences. So one thing that I saw him take a lot of growth in this year was like the value of a possession. His turnovers went way down, organizing, manipulating ahead of the time. He's such a freak that he can just make a play in the moment naturally, but there's a lot of ways where you can set that up way ahead of time. You know what I mean? So he took a lot of steps in the right direction this year. So yeah, I don't know. That's something that we have to figure out as a group, right? It's like is everybody's role and what is it going to be? And it sounds silly to say that, you know what I mean? But a lot of like this regiment that we need, is kind of that will help things. If we knew everything that was going to come,
Yeah, I think that's an interesting answer from Fred, just because
He said basically the same thing, man. We need roles.
No, but that's the thing. Like, I think the main theme of coming out of it was the role definition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like that was the whole conversation coming into this season, and that remains the conversation heading into next season.
Yeah. I asked the question. It was like Ryan Wolstad actually. They had asked the previous question about sort of what he thought of Scottie this summer and sort of what his best advice was for Scottie. And Fred really talked about just getting in the lab, really working, especially for a player that young. It's just sort of that's the only thing that could really speed up the process. And he mentioned that Scottie's already, beginning to do that. And he's getting a regiment down and, said a lot of glowing things. Sky's the limit, So I had the follow-up question. I wanted to sort of talk about sort of the fit because, obviously Scottie wants to be the point guard. Obviously Fred plays point guard, right? So sort of like, how do you manage that? How do you facilitate that? And that's why he said the thing about like, I would love to play with another point guard, which I do think is actually something that when you think back on this whole, like, 10 years, long time, all that kind of stuff, like this 10-year period with the Raptors being successful, they've always had like 2 point guards on the floor, or at least 2 players functionally playing point guard, right?
But no more than 2 ever, though. Yeah.
No, I mean they've even had 3 because even that
forgot about those days.
Yeah, well, the 14-15 season, they had Kyle, they had Gravis, they also had Lou Williams. But even in those moments where DeMar DeRozan became more and more sort of a combo guard, right? You had Kyle and DeMar in those sort of moments, and you're able to split it. And of course, then you had Kyle and Fred being able to sort of have 2 point guard looks a long time. And yeah, I mean, I do think that that's something historically that has worked in this city, in this franchise, under these coaches. So I actually don't think that really is something that is sort of taking away from each other. Like even the point about sort of valuing possessions, it was interesting because I looked it up. Scottie's averaging slightly more turnovers this year, 2.0 versus 1.8 last year. But I do think that he's had more playmaking responsibilities, as evidenced by his increase in assists from 3.5 to 4.8. So actually that's a better assist to turnover ratio, right? So that's actually better. But the idea that you could pass a couple of things along, I think that's good. And I think that there's been this like conversation along the season in terms of just like, how does all this roster fit? Does Fred fit with Scottie? Does Pascal fit with Scottie? All this other kind of stuff. But I think that, the more his game grows and develops, then we can answer this question. Right now, I think Scottie to me is still very much a question in terms of like, what is he specifically? What is he going to be moving forward? What's his best position moving forward? We've asked Nick this question over the course of the season, and he hasn't really given a clear answer on it. He's sometimes even kind of scoffed at it and said sort of like, why does it matter? But then again, it kind of does come back to that final point of like, this would really clarify itself once everyone has roles.
Yeah, no, I think
Sorry.
no,
It feels like something very straightforward, but
No, but
it's somehow not.
I think it's the thing too for you. It's like these are the things that we've talked about all year. Like none of the things that you've said, I think, in this segment is new. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we've pointed out these problems, and one of the things too, I think for anybody looking at this roster, like the fastest path if you want to take a shortcut to getting back to winning is Scottie, making a leap potentially next season. And he talked about wanting to get more workouts in, and one of the things that he highlighted was he needed to get better. He wanted to get better at his conditioning as well, and he was asked how his conditioning impacted his play this year, and here's what he had to say.
I wouldn't say it really. I wouldn't say it impacted it super, but I get tired at times where I'm picking up full court the way I play. I do a lot of. I feel like wear it off for me. It really starts on the defensive end. So me picking up full court, making a lot of rotations and things that I do on the floor. I feel like it's just going for me to take another step defensively. I feel like it'll just take a different level of conditioning. I work really hard on the defensive end, so I feel like I just going to take another step from that.
What did you make of Scottie on the defensive end this year?
Yeah, I mean, he had the second most defensive responsibility, I think, behind OG. Like most times you saw Scottie this season, rotate between guarding centers to guarding point guards, right? You saw a lot of that in terms of before Yak came here. Primarily, the Raptors' defensive strategy was to have OG and Scottie on both sides of the opposing teams, like favorite pick and roll action, so they could switch those. And like for example, if we were playing against the Sixers, it was like Scottie on Joel and OG on James Harden, and then switching that, right? So, yeah, I mean, he had lots of defensive responsibilities, and I think that this is all part of like the stuff that we don't quite see when we're talking about like what their numbers are at the end of the day, or even what the play types are running and stuff like that. Like this stuff is secondary to sort of like how much they have in the tank to sort of give in the first place, and learning how to manage that is a huge part of being a professional. Like I think that for Scottie, like he did such a great job of it last season in terms of coming into this league. Obviously, he won Rookie of the Year. Played with a lot of exuberance, played a lot of minutes, stayed pretty healthy for the course of the season. I think that set the bar so high that it's like these are still parts of maturation process for any young player, right? So, no, I'm not surprised. I mean, like it's good. I think the one big takeaway I like from a lot of the season-ending press conferences is just like how much accountability players took in terms of being honest about the shortcomings of the roster and sort of what they individually need to do better as well. So I like this approach from Scottie. It's very mature.
Yeah, well, we'll see what happens, in the summer with these players and when they come back. Those are really the main things for me. I know the rest of the players, all talked about, their contract situations, not really any updates there. Most of them said, OG said he'd love to be here. Pascal said if they came to him with an extension, he'd love to have that conversation, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Not really anything else for me to take away. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to highlight.
No, I mean, look, even the stuff about like, long term, are you going to stay here or and the same thing with the questions about like Nick Nurse, are you happy with him as coach? Essentially, like the question, the answer you have to ask yourself is what are they supposed to say?
No, there's no other answer that they're going to provide.
That's kind of why we're not really running these clips or even putting them on a quote graphic or anything like that. It's not to say that they're lying or deceitful, but it's like in that position when they're put on a podium like that, if they say anything else other than I'm a fan, like. It'll become a much bigger story. So
Man, it was a
I think
media,
that's just good media training.
It was a good media exercise.
I don't know if I fully buy all of it, but hey, listen,
for all involved except for Nick. Nick had a chance to say that he did regret those comments, but it's okay. We're finished having that conversation.
Well, as Nick would say, it was the media's fault.
Yeah.
It was the media's fault for bringing it up.
Before we take the break, just want to mention another member of Heavy.com, Sean Devini.
Yo, how deep is this roster, man?
This was making the rounds today.
The roster is heavy.
So he quoted an anonymous leak source that says he expects the Raptors to make significant changes this summer.
Okay.
And I just want to get ahead of this. We're not gonna deal in it. We already did the trade deadline. And the Raptors are not allowed to be the main character of the trade market anymore after what they put us through. So unless of course everyone around the league is like looking at this situation and being like, they had a disappointing season. They've got all these free agents and all this, like they're going to have to make significant changes. We've known that Masai and Bobby, lots of times will pick their own path the one not expected by everyone else. So we're just not going to dabble in these rumors until there's anything like concrete or something interesting to talk about.
Yeah, like again, like what I have to say with this is similar to what I said about the Knicks situation yesterday. It's just like unless these people have had conversations with Nick and Bobby in terms of the specific directions of the team, I even think even agents might be a little bit confused in terms of what's going on here, right? Because on paper, like this is very messy. Like the Raptors are out of the first round pick next year. They aren't going to pick in the lottery this year or high in the lottery. They don't have any chance to win it, really. It's like a 1% chance of the top pick, like,
Just jump Dallas. That's all I want.
Okay, let's jump Dallas.
I want Nico Harrison to be sad because he slandered Dorian
I
Finney-Smith.
can't wait, man. Who do you think they're going to send to the lottery, by the way? Because you got to send a representative.
I think it's going to be, the Raptors?
Well, we had Masai and then we had Fred last time. We can't send Fred now. He's a free agent, so.
Yeah.
Well, when he turns down his player option, but.
Let's send Rico Hines there. Yeah,
Rico
just
Hines.
Change it up.
All right.
How about that?
Face of the franchise, Rico Hines. Well, because
who do you want?
You can't put Nick in there.
So who do you want? It's tough to pick a player too.
If Masai sends Bobby, it won't be fair, man. Masai, if you're not one to send there, you got to go there yourself. Don't put Bobby on that poster again, man.
I want Otto Porter Jr. Who has a player option, hold up a lucky chicken feet, Like a lucky chicken feet, how they bring the lucky superstitious stuff. If Otto Porter helps us jump from 11th to 8th,
one of the most unluckiest players in the league.
Do you think the contract would have been worth it if he represents us and brings us good luck?
You know what? You're right. There is a redemption story arc there. I mean, look, it's a free trip to New York. I mean, whoever wants to go to New York that day or for that weekend.
I think he's been to New York during this last 4 months.
Okay, that's fair.
Oh God.
What was my point? Yeah, unless people have talked to them, like we really don't.
Yes.
Right. And like on paper right now, it's a bad situation. You have multiple key players going into free agency. You have lots of players being available for extension, like Pascal, and I think Precious is also up for a rookie scale extension too. So there's a lot of things going on. Like it's gonna be a really busy summer. I think on paper it makes a lot of sense to make a lot of changes, but we said this at the trade deadline as well, and they chose to go in the other direction. So. They are the wild card. They really are the wild card.
I'm sorry.
Anonymous sources have just told me in my ear that they're going to be the wild card.
Once again, the Raptors are here again. All right, I feel like your excitement level is like a 5 today talking about the Raps. So let's talk about the first weekend of the playoffs when we come back.
All right. Okay, we're going to take that break. I've been your host, Willu. That's Alex Wong. You're listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wayne Liu. Continue to be joined by co-host and producer Alex Wong. Got some shout-outs for us, Alex?
Yeah, I just want to quickly shout out Shanda and her husband from Corner Brook, Newfoundland. You know, longtime listeners. I know, you know Shanda as well.
I do know Shanda.
They're in town.
Yeah,
what's up?
I knew Shanda was in town because I was in the elevator and I was looking at the
This was at
Jumbotron
Wednesday's
screen.
game.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and like Shanda's like photo popped up on one of those like fans at the game. Use hashtag whatever.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
it was on
that's
there.
cool.
So shouts to Shanda.
Yeah, so
You get to connect, but you did.
no, I met up with her yesterday, and her husband dropped off the final 2 signed copies of Cover Story for them. They're going to Jay's game tonight. And as we were talking in the lobby of the downtown hotel yesterday, because the Jays were playing, like these 5 Jays fans came in carrying one guy who was like, apparently too drunk already. It was 5 p.m. That's my anecdote for you.
That's like half of what baseball games are for.
Yeah, that's Front Street for you.
That really is Front Street vibes. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, especially when the summertime comes around.
Oh,
which
man.
apparently we just skipped spring and now we're just in
Yeah,
summertime.
there is no spring ever here.
Okay.
Programming note for those who've been, thanking Will for all his coverage this week. Coverage is not over just because the Raptors season is over.
I feel like I have to say this every summer, but I love all of basketball, so this is actually when the season starts for me. Really,
Didn't notice in the first segment.
sorry, man.
This guy put up a Tony Snell and
it's
got
'cause
yelled
you
at for
gave me
5
You
minutes.
gave me a cup of milk right before going to air. Like I don't know, man.
That damn tapioca cost me 25 minutes of content.
That's all good.
We will be on air and be in your podcast feeds as well regularly until the end of the NBA Finals. And as people know, in the offseason, we like to do interviews and other content, the banter pod and things like that. So, keep watching us on all the different platforms, YouTube, on TV, on radio, all of that. We'll update you when the schedule changes. Keep us the #1 basketball podcast in Canada so I can become more powerful. But more importantly, my dad doesn't think that I'm disappointed because he checks that chart.
Your dad checks the
Yo,
podcasting
he
charts?
found the chart.
Asian dad.
No, this is like the adult version of a report
after
card.
dinner, I saw him laying down with his iPad and he was on the page.
No way.
He's like, did Draymond Green pass them yet?
Oh my god.
Emotional, damn it.
That's actually incredible.
It's
Because my
tough.
parents don't even look for this at all.
I'm
so-
under a lot of pressure right now.
Wow. Okay.
So just click on these episodes. First segment is all right today, but
this guy damn near 40 getting a report card from his dad, man. Oh my goodness.
Anyways.
Yeah, wow.
Let's get your excitement up. So we've touched on a couple playoff series in the first round. I want to touch on a couple more here in the second segment, but I also just want to go through before the start of the weekend, all the game ones this weekend. So I've written down my predictions for the first round, and we'll use that to go through the series. Many of them we've touched on or don't really need to talk about. And I want to just work with you, collaboratively. So I'm going to present to you my predictions, and let's just come to an agreement here on what we think.
Let's do it.
Okay, so Bucks in 4. Can we move on that? Bucks versus either Miami or Chicago.
The funniest thing
30
is
seconds.
we don't even know who the opponent is, but we do know the outcome. Bucks in 4. Listen, we saw Bucks in 4 last year, didn't we, against the Bulls?
Was it Chicago? Yeah, it was Chicago.
Yeah.
I want to say.
I feel like I've seen Bucks Bulls like 4 times already.
Yeah, and it's always been 4
and I've
games,
also
I feel
seen
like.
Bucks Heat a couple times too. So
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that the veteran Bucks, who the one thing you can say about them is that they're just older. They do have a lot of 30-year-olds in the rotation.
Yeah.
They just got a whole week off to just chill. Right.
Yep.
So I mean, this is
You think Thanasis did more pods than us this week?
this was prime podcasting time.
This
for
is my
Thanasis.
pod.
I hope he
I saw
loaded up,
Draymond
man.
drop like 3 pods this week. Don't download and listen to those.
That's right. Keep
Yeah.
us #1. And so Alex's dad
You don't understand the
won't take
pressure I'm
away his
under.
Game Boy. Actually, you didn't even have Game Boys when you're growing up, man. They're gonna take away your baseball
Oh, come on, man.
cards.
This guy talking Atari right now?
Oh man.
Welcome to
They're
the
gonna
show.
take away your
Finally,
Tamagotchi,
35 minutes in. Welcome, man. Welcome to the show. Bucks in 4. We moving on?
Bucks in 4.
We're in agreement here?
Yeah, 5 at most.
Okay, so the #1 seed over in the West, again, we don't know the opponent. It's going to be Denver versus either OKC or Minnesota. I'm taking Denver in 5.
5 sounds fair. I mean, it'll be very difficult to beat Denver in their gym for these younger teams. I do feel like between the two of them, which team do you think that they would prefer to see?
I don't know. Like, does OKC have any bigs?
No.
right? So who's guarding Jokic? 2 Jalen Williamses stacked on top of each other?
Yes, that's actually what's going to happen.
So-
They're going to try to play with 6 players because 2 of them have the same name.
No disrespect to OKC or Minnesota. I really don't think it's that much of a stress for Denver, even though they were 12 and 11 down the stretch and struggled a little bit.
Like, I could see Shea, like, really carrying them in a way, and I could see, like, that's pretty much it, though.
I just think the 1-8
I feel like
discrepancy,
OKC is the better matchup
yeah.
for Denver. Because at least with Karl Anthony Towns, like, you could stretch it out a little bit.
the big meow. Yeah.
The big... That's not what I'd be calling him. I'd be calling him that character from
Oh,
The
come on,
Sopranos.
man. Okay. Please unjoin the show. Nuggets in 5.
wanted this.
Are we in agreement?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
But I'm just trying to get through the series that aren't as interesting, and then
Yeah,
we'll
that's
actually talk about the ones that we care about. Boston Celtics against the Atlanta Hawks, the 2-7 matchup. We touched on this earlier this week. I'm going with Boston in 5 here.
And I could
Give
also
them one
see
more
this being
game?
a sweep. I don't know.
Sweep? Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go 6.
I feel very confident in the way the Celtics can perform in the playoffs.
Let's go Celtics in 4 then.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
I'm thinking like one of the things that I saw from Atlanta, especially in the playing game, but even over the course of the season, is like when they're healthy, which they are right now, like their bench does give them an advantage over a lot of teams. Right, they can bring guys who are difference makers, both defensively and offensively. But at the same time, the Celtics are also really great at that. So that's also neutralizing one of their advantages. And of course, the Celtics starting 5, I think, is really well equipped to score on these guys. If I would say Atlanta has a weakness, it not just the fact that they're the most mid team of all time. It's also just that like big wings I think can really have their way against them. And there's just not enough big wing defenders I think to guard both Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum.
Yeah, I think it's just a bad matchup for them. You look at Atlanta,
Yeah.
like they have talent on paper.
No, for sure. It's also is Jaylen Brown's hand okay?
Yeah.
Like, what happened there?
So he
again?
cut his hand on a glass vase, like at home or something like that. We haven't had an injury update on that, but I assume he's good to go.
I mean, I suppose, but if you had 5 stitches, like that sounds painful.
Yeah.
That sounds really,
But
really painful.
we're going Celtics with a sweep.
I think there's a real chance Celtics sweep.
Okay,
this.
Boston Celtics lover Will Lou.
Damn it.
Next up, Sixers against the Nets. We haven't really talked about this series. So, I mean, the rosters have changed. For Brooklyn, the roster has changed up so much during the season, but the Sixers did sweep them in the season series 4-0. And you said the most, you have it here in the notes. In February, they had a game after all the trades when the Sixers won by 3 points, and they kind of came back on Brooklyn. I think the Sixers are going to roll in this first round series. I really don't think Brooklyn can really push them here. I got Sixers in 5.
Yeah, I think Nick Claxton's had a really good defensive season, but I do think that one of the issues for him guarding Joel is just I just don't think he's able to keep Joel from getting to his spots. Now, very few teams in the league can keep Joel from getting to his spots, right? But there is a physicality element that is just so much overwhelmingly in favor of Joel in that matchup. I think that obviously they're gonna have all these wings, and they could maybe replicate similar strategies to what Toronto used against them last year. But yeah, I think 5 makes sense just because you have to factor in the Sixers. Besides Joel, I don't fully trust the rest of them. And I do think that with the way Brooklyn can play in terms of spacing out the floor, that there will be a game where they hit 23s. And I'm going to give them that game. But yeah, 6 and 5 seems pretty reasonable.
Okay.
The first round for the East is going to be kind of mid. I'm not going to lie. I think the second round is going to be amazing, but we have to endure the first round to get there.
Yeah, the second round always for me is always the best round. Okay, here are some of the series that we haven't talked about. One of them is Cleveland against New York.
Yeah, this one's going to be great.
4-5 matchup. So the key injury is Julius Randle. He sprained his ankle at the end of March. He hasn't fully practiced yet. He's been at practice, but not been with the team. I don't think he's going to be playing this weekend. So that's going to be huge. Jalen Brunson, obviously a huge player for the Knicks. The Knicks have a lot of depth off the bench as well.
Yep.
We know about Cleveland with Donovan Mitchell and that starting lineup with the 2 generational defenders, Jared Allen and your guy, Evan Mobley.
I thought you were going to say Lamar Stevens.
Oh my God, or Isaac Okoro. This is a toss-up for me. I'm one of those guys who is excited to see playoff games played at Madison Square Garden. I think it's going to be a really good vibe there.
Yeah, for sure.
We saw that a couple of years ago with Trae Young there, but I think the Cavs are a really good team, man. I know they were stuck in that 4th seed, but I do think it's going to go back and forth here. I'm going with Cleveland in 7.
Yeah, 7. I feel like I don't know. I do think Cleveland's going to win this series. I just think that if you look at Donovan Mitchell's playoff track record, it is still pretty great.
What about last year? when
Last year was-
Jalen Brunson just cooked them.
Last year
Here's
was
the rematch.
different, right? And this year the rematch is gonna be very fun. I mean, that was the highlight in the last time they met with each other. Is that like, you know, Brunson I think had 48, which is a career high for him, and Mitchell had like 44. Like these obviously guys can really go back and forth against each other. But yeah, I mean, Randall's injury I think really does push it strongly in favor of Cleveland, no matter what. But I'm curious to see because like a lot of these guys are younger and we haven't seen them in a playoff setting, right? And so, you know, when I'm thinking about the Knicks side, I mean, I'm wondering about their bench in terms of like, that's been a big strength of theirs, you know, but that's a younger group. Can they sort of replicate that success in the playoffs, right? And you know, from the Cleveland perspective, I feel like they've had such a successful year, and we've sort of just penciled them in the playoffs this whole time. But it's a different animal, and I'm curious to see how Evan Mobley reacts to that. I'm curious to see how, you know, Darius Garland reacts to all this too. So it's this is one of the most even matchups, which is exactly what you expect with 4-5. But I still think that Cleveland has the edge ultimately, just because I trust Mitchell more than I trust anybody else in the series.
Yeah, so let's just have home team win every game in this series.
No, I mean I think this is how it should break out.
Cavs in 7.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it. Lakers Grizzlies we talked about earlier this week. I'm taking the Lakers in 7.
I feel like no one really likes any of the top seeds. This is like my vibe with all of it.
I think the thing with the West is like,
in the West.
I want to ask you, it's like, what do you value, right? Because like, if you value regular season success,
Mhm.
you point it towards Denver, point it towards Memphis, and even Sacramento, which we're going to talk about, right?
Mhm.
If you value, you know, stars in the playoffs, best player in the series, you take Phoenix. Because arguably they could have the 2 best players like in the West playoffs in Devin Booker and Kevin Durant.
Sure. Yeah.
Right? Or do you value someone like LeBron and the Lakers, right? That
Mhm.
there's an experience there. You look at the Warriors, do you value their continuity and championship experience? It's really just what you value, right? And in this
That's fair. That's fair.
in this matchup, do you value, you know, the youth of the Grizzlies versus an older team in the Lakers, right?
I think to me, like just watching the Grizzlies perform last year in the playoffs, it didn't really give me a lot of confidence.
Oh,
My-
yeah, to say that's an understatement, man. They were
Yeah.
so chaotic in that first round against Minnesota and then against the Warriors. Dylan Brooks shot them out of that series.
Dylan Brooks shot him out of the series. It was also about breaking the rules and
That's
breaking
right.
Gary.
Yep, he
Gary
injured
Payton.
Gary Payton II.
And it was about like Jordan Poole maybe like did a judo move on
Yeah.
John Morant's
But
knee.
this is
Like,
the-
it
this
was
is-
never
yeah.
really about the basketball itself, and that's
Yeah.
why I feel like for a team like Memphis, like their half court offense needs to be a lot better. To be, I mean, the Lakers are pretty good defensively now,
Mhm.
right? There's no doubt, and I think that they're gonna try to play in the fast, a faster style of game, which I always question in the playoffs. And then also, I just do feel like, you know, Memphis's size, like that's typically an advantage that they would have against a lot of teams. They don't have that anymore, especially because of the injuries, but especially against the Lakers. And so this is a tough time to run into them, especially early on in the series. You never really know with the Lakers. I'm worried about injuries. I wouldn't be surprised at all if somebody, you know, was unable to sort of play in a portion of this sort of matchup. But unfortunately, I also have the Lakers. And that's no disrespect to Memphis, by the way. I don't think the Lakers are well equipped to guard Memphis.
Lakers are not a typical 7 seed with their roster coming in.
Yeah, I know, but like at the same time, like I do think Memphis is a really good team, but this is a bad matchup for them. But I do think that they will have certain advantages. Obviously, like and I don't see anyone on the Lakers really stepping in to guard, you know, John Morant, for example.
Yeah, and like the Lakers draw a lot of fouls, and we know that Jaren Jackson Jr., like you mentioned earlier this week, gets in a lot of foul trouble. And I think when you get deeper into a series too, you know, do you favor Memphis just because they've got, you know, the younger players and more energy? Is fatigue going to set in, or do you trust a LeBron-led team more, right, in a Game 6 or in a take-all Game 7, right?
Sure,
It's really hard to pick. But I'm gonna trust LeBron and the better team that he has around him now from the start of the season.
That's fair. That's fair.
You want to go with me on that? Lakers
Do
in
you think
7?
it'll go all the way to 7 games?
Yeah, I can see it.
So they will have to win on the road in Memphis?
Yeah, I'm not worried about that.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, LeBron's been in a lot of adverse situations, and this is not going to be one of them.
I hope he says that. By the way, the best part about this series is really just going to be what Dylan Brooks does to LeBron.
I'm already so tired of it, and nothing has happened.
No, I mean,
I'm so tired
I'm
of it.
expecting at one point like LeBron's gonna fall over and like Dylan Brooks is gonna raise his jersey and give him a raspberry or something. Like you just never know. There's nothing is off the table with it.
That's what I do. I talk.
That is one of my favorite quotes ever because it also defines our jobs. That's
Like,
all we
it's
do.
supposed to, yeah.
All we do is come in here and talk trash
Every day.
about the entire NBA. Next up, excited for this one. No Paul George, not expected to play in this series between Phoenix and the Clippers. Phoenix for me basically had like a month of preseason, like playing against all these like teams that they never played in a real competitive game, sat all their guys at the end when they could have played against the Lakers and Clippers in like some competitive game. So with KD, they haven't really faced any like intense competition. And now they're just going to start the playoffs with this team. Now, granted, they are undefeated with KD. I just think the Paul George injury is going to be really hard to overcome, like all due respect to Kawhi Leonard. I actually am picking the Suns to win this relatively easily in 5.
I feel like the Clippers, to me, like maybe it's because we've seen Paul George and Kawhi injured so much, but like we've seen a shorthanded Clippers team like extend series. Now, of course, we've seen the roster and personnel change. What was that for?
That's Kawhi. Sometimes we do not.
I know that's Kawhi.
Sometimes we do not expect this from Derek.
Oh man, no, but like they obviously have players sort of coming in and out. But no, I kind of like their depth. Meanwhile, I don't really trust Phoenix's depth. I do think Monty Williams has done a really great job of sort of getting guys to sort of play in his system and produce. But at the same time, in a playoff series, like I do question sort of, can you trust, Josh Okogie to continue like the promising play that he's had for a lot of the season, or are you going to really rely on Terrence Ross? I'm sorry, but like I really fundamentally do not trust Terrence Ross.
Our guy Ish Wainwright, Campaign, and all these guys. I'm totally with you on that point. I just don't think it's going to factor in until maybe later in the playoffs.
I don't know, man. I'm giving Kawhi more than one game in this series.
Really?
Like I think Phoenix is going to win just because I do think that obviously they're very, very talented relative to sort of where they are in the final standings. Were they 4 or 5?
Yeah, so 4 or 5. So they were 5th.
They were 5th. Yeah, so they're obviously have way more talent than a typical 5th seed, but yeah, at the same time, like I don't know, maybe it's just I trust Kawhi too much, but I think Kawhi's going to take over in some of those games.
So you want to go Suns in 6?
I might say Suns in 7, to be honest.
All right.
I really would like to see Suns in 7. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I do feel like this is the time maybe you catch Phoenix a little bit less like cohesion and chemistry and all that kind of stuff, and you can extend it in the first round. But I mean, ultimately, yeah, they are kind of just 1 star short, unfortunately.
I think we're gonna learn a lot just from like game 1. Like I can just see just KD coming out here just raining jumpers over like, I don't know, Norm Powell, Robert Covington. I guess I would put Kawhi on.
No, they should put Kawhi on him.
But it's like you got Devin Booker there as well. Like I could easily see the Suns just coming out and like winning by 30 and just making a statement to set the tone. But it's not like
the Clippers have no depth at all. Like the Clippers are going to have, I would say, more depth off the bench.
I just think the Paul George injury is so huge.
No,
in this matchup.
Fundamentally, I think it'll be huge, but at the same time, I think for me, the main appeal of this series is just seeing like the second and third best forwards of this generation to play against each other in a full series.
That's all I want to see.
The last time I really remember seeing Kawhi versus KD was that game in Scotiabank Arena when obviously Kawhi was in Toronto and Kawhi had 37 and KD had 51. And the Raptors ultimately won that game. It was actually one of my favorite regular season games ever watching the Raptors. I think Kyle Lowry hit a 3 in overtime or made down the stretch. It was a huge 3. I think Pascal had like 25 or something like that too. But yeah, no, that game was really, really incredible just watching those two forwards go at each other. And we haven't had like a great series between those two with them both being in their prime. So this might be their last chance to do it. And I'm excited, man.
Okay, so we're going to go Suns in 7.
I'm going to go Suns in 7. If you want to go Suns in 5.
I want to collaborate with you on all these picks, man.
Got you.
And now it's time for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game. So thought for this segment today, we would highlight, I think, the series that everyone's most excited about, the Sacramento Kings and the Golden State Warriors. So we know that the Kings are the 3 seed, the number 1 offense in the league this year, feel-good story. They haven't made the playoffs since 2006. We know the Warriors, I believe, won like 9 games on the road this season, give or take. The Warriors in the playoffs, though, have won a road game in 27 consecutive playoff series.
What kind of stat
dating
is that?
back to 2013. Call me Stats Williams.
What kind of stat is that?
We didn't even have time to talk about my thing on is Steph underrated. Just because I feel like when you get into a 7-game series, when it's like prime LeBron, prime Giannis, like people are just like, oh, best player in the series, easy. We're just going to pick that team. Why don't we do this with Steph? Like, I'm looking at this series, like the Warriors have made the finals the last 6 times that they were in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So outside of the time that when they missed in 2020 with all the injuries, they lost 2 games in the 2021 play-in without Klay Thompson. They haven't lost a series to a Western Conference team since 2014 in the first round. That was to the Clippers. That was the Donald Sterling series and Mark Jackson's last series as a head coach. Only 2 teams have taken them to 7 games during this span in the West. 3-1 comeback against OKC and the comeback against Houston when they were down 3-2.
Right.
Those are the only 2 West teams that ever pushed them to 7 games. All due respect to the Sacramento Kings.
They are none of those teams.
I do not respect their pedigree carrying over into the playoffs. I think the Warriors might have trouble later on just because they have to exhaust so much energy winning these road games. I've got the Warriors in 6, and the line for game 1 is basically it's a pick'em. So it's a pick'em. I am gonna go with the Warriors to take game 1. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, there shouldn't even be too much of a question. With all due respect to Sacramento, but like if you just think about this iteration of the Warriors, right? Only 2 teams have ever beat them in a playoff series. It's like LeBron at his very peak, with Kyrie, with Kevin Love, and with some extenuating circumstances. Like, I don't want to sound like Aisha Curry, but when have you ever seen Steph Curry foul out of a game?
Yeah.
Okay.
And let's be clear, with LeBron playing like out of his mind.
Yeah,
with a 3-1 comeback.
Literally greatest of all times behavior from LeBron. Okay. Saw
make
that
the
series.
goat sounds. You want to make the goat?
Why
did you do that?
And then we saw it in 2019, and that
Your
was
Toronto
obviously
Raptors.
with some injuries that clouded the outcome of that series. So like, no, I just don't think that Sacramento really has the goods to sort of do it here against the Warriors. I see the Warriors; they're healthy. Wiggins came back in time. They got Gary Payton back after all that time.
They have Steph Curry.
Right? Like, the only thing they're missing from last year is Otto Porter, but they got Dante DiVincenzo, so they were able to really replace a lot of that production with a different player, but similar or maybe similar overall level of production. So, no, I actually really like the Warriors. Not only in this game, but if we're talking about, are we making championship predictions?
Yeah, we ran out of time to give a detailed explanation, so maybe we can touch on it on Monday. But my prediction is Sixers Warriors in the finals.
Yeah, I got Warriors Celtics in a rematch.
Oh, okay.
And
Boston,
unfortunately, I think Boston
supporter.
takes it this time. I'm
Boston
sorry.
No, this is going to be like 2001, man. When Iverson won the MVP and they went to the finals. Embiid, this is the year for Embiid, I think.
Okay.
You've seen him push through. He's going to be the best player in the East. And James Harden won't have to win that many games because Embiid's going to be the new Shaq.
That's fun. Well,
that's it. So that was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. It's a whole new game.
All right. Well, enjoy the NBA playoffs. It's going to be great. That does it for us today. I've been your host, Will Lou, and you've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Thanks once again, our producer and co-host, Alex Wong, for carrying this episode. Our board producer, Derek Brandale, and Jennifer Rowland for helping on the YouTube stream. We'll be back to talk more about the NBA next week.